I used to believe my marriage was solid. No, unshakable. 10 years together, a house we made into a home, and a rhythm that felt like it could last forever. My wife, Emily, and I had our routines: Sunday morning coffee at the little cafe on Main Street, late night binge watching sessions, and whispered jokes only we understood. She wasn't just my wife. She was my best friend. I work in IT, and Emily is in marketing. Our jobs are stable, and our life together felt just as steady. Sure, there were occasional arguments, who doesn't have them, but nothing major. At least, that's what I thought. Then, small things started happening. Little shifts. At first, I chalked it up to stress. Emily was busier than usual, taking more work calls in the evenings, texting a lot, way more than before. I'd glance over sometimes, and she'd tilt her phone away or press the power button too quickly. I told myself I was being paranoid. Then, one evening, she said she was going out with colleagues for drinks. Just a few people from work, she said, kissing my cheek before grabbing her purse. That alone wasn't suspicious. But when I called her at 10:30 p.m., just to check in, she didn't answer. Emily always answers. Always. She texted me at 11:15. Sorry, babe. Just got caught up talking. Be home soon, red heart. Something about it felt off. Then there were the calls. 3 times in the last month, I picked up our home phone, only to hear the caller hang up immediately. It was subtle, almost meaningless, except that in the previous 10 years, it had only ever happened once. I tried to shake it off. But I couldn't. I started paying attention. Noticing patterns. One morning, as I was about to leave for work, Emily's phone buzzed on the nightstand. She was still in the shower, and normally, I wouldn't have given it a second glance. But the notification caught my eye. A text. From a contact saved as J. Last night was incredible. Can't stop thinking about you. I felt something deep inside me snap. I didn't check the message. Didn't snoop. I just stood there, staring at her phone, my heart pounding in my chest. When Emily came out of the shower, she was humming, towel wrapped around her body. She kissed my cheek and smiled. But all I could think was, who the hell is Jay? I told myself not to jump to conclusions. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe I was being crazy. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. And I was about to find out exactly what it was. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay there in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to Emily's steady breathing beside me. The text from Jay burned in my brain. Last night was incredible. Can't stop thinking about you. There was no misunderstanding that. No twisting it into something innocent. It was a message meant for lovers. My wife had a lover. I turned my head slightly, looking at her in the dim light. Her face was peaceful, serene. Like she didn't have a care in the world. Like she wasn't lying next to the man she was betraying. I wanted to wake her up right then. To shake her. To demand answers. But I didn't. I needed proof. A single text wasn't enough, not for me, and certainly not for the kind of divorce lawyer I'd need if this went where I thought it would. So I waited. The next morning, Emily got up like nothing had happened. She showered, made her coffee, and kissed me on the cheek before heading out to work. I stayed home. Told my boss I wasn't feeling well. And then I got to work. The investigation begins. Emily's phone was locked, and she never left it unattended for long. But she wasn't careful with her laptop. She used the same password for almost everything, and thanks to a shared Amazon account, I knew exactly what it was. While she was at work, I sat at the kitchen table, hands shaking slightly, and opened her laptop. The password worked on the first try. Her email was uneventful. So was Facebook. Then I checked her iCloud account. That's where I found it. The hidden messages. Emily wasn't just cheating. She was deeply involved with someone else. There were texts going back months. Photos. Videos. Plans. Her lover's name was Jake. A coworker. The texts made it clear this wasn't a one-time thing. I wish I was waking up next to you. God, the way you touched me last night. I'm still shaking. When can we get away again? I hate sneaking around. I scrolled through, stomach twisting, heart pounding. Then I found the receipts. Hotel stays. Dinners I wasn't invited to. Even a flight reservation. She had planned a weekend trip with him, telling me she was going on a work retreat. I closed the laptop. Sat there in silence. I had the proof now. But instead of relief, I felt a deep, hollow ache. Because this wasn't just a mistake. This wasn't something small. This was a second life. The breaking point. When Emily got home that evening, she kissed me hello. Like nothing was wrong. Like she hadn't been texting another man all day. I forced myself to act normal. Asked her how work was. She smiled and said, busy, as usual. Liar. I kept watching her, searching for guilt, hesitation, regret. I saw none. She had been lying to my face for months. I needed to see it with my own eyes. So the next day, I followed her. She told me she had a meeting across town. Instead, she drove straight to a hotel. I parked across the street and watched her walk inside, wearing the same sexy dress she used to wear for our anniversary dinners. 10 minutes later, Jake walked in after her. I felt something in me break. It was real. All of it. The woman I loved, the woman I had built a life with, was in that hotel room with another man. And I was sitting in my car, watching it happen. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly they ached. I wanted to storm inside. To tear the whole building down. But I didn't. I took out my phone and snapped a few pictures instead. I already had the texts. The receipts. Now I had them together. I forced myself to drive home. To wait. Because soon Emily would have to face me. And there would be no more lies. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? I had spent the entire day uncovering the truth, scrolling through months of messages, tracking my wife to a hotel, watching her cheat on me with my own eyes. And now, she was lying next to me, sleeping peacefully, as if she wasn't living a double life. I stared at the ceiling in the darkness, my mind racing. What do I do now? Do I wake her up right now and demand the truth? Do I walk away silently, pack my bags and leave? Or do I make her suffer the way she's made me suffer? I had so many questions. Why him? Why now? Did she ever really love me, or had it all been a lie? But I knew I wouldn't get the answers by sitting here. So I waited. Plotted. Prepared. The setup. The next morning, Emily got up early. She was in a good mood, too good. Morning, babe, she said, stretching. You sleep okay? I forced a smile. Yeah, just a little tired. She kissed me on the cheek, oblivious to the fact that I knew everything. I watched as she showered, got dressed, and left for work. As soon as she was gone, I got to work. First, I made copies of everything, the texts, the photos, the receipts. I printed them out and organized them into a neat folder. I wanted everything in one place, ready for when I finally confronted her. Then, I sent an email to a divorce lawyer. No appointment yet, just an inquiry. I wasn't sure what I was going to do, but I knew I needed options. And finally, I made a plan. I was done waiting. Tonight, when she came home, there would be no more lies. The confrontation. Emily walked through the door at 6:45 p.m., her hair slightly messy, her makeup touched up. I knew exactly where she had been. She kicked off her heels, set her purse down, and smiled at me like nothing was wrong. Hey, love, she said, walking toward me. How was your day? I didn't answer. I just stared at her. That was the first time she hesitated. A flicker of confusion crossed her face. "Babe," she said, her tone shifting. Still, I said nothing. Instead, I reached to the side of the couch and picked up the folder. Then, I tossed it onto the coffee table in front of her. She looked at it, confused. "What's this?" My voice was calm. Too calm. "Go ahead. Open it." She frowned but did as I asked. The moment she flipped through the first few pages, her face changed. Gone was the casual, confident woman who walked in minutes ago. Her eyes widened as she skimmed through the text messages, the photos, the receipts. Her mouth opened slightly, as if trying to form words, but nothing came out. She flipped through faster, her hands shaking now. Then she slammed the folder shut. Her breathing was heavy. She finally looked at me. And for the first time in months, I saw it. Fear. I can explain," she stammered. I let out a short, bitter laugh. "Can you?" She nodded quickly, desperately. It's not what it looks like." I clenched my jaw. "Emily. Don't insult me. I followed you. I saw you go into the hotel. I saw Jake go in after you." Her lips trembled. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. She knew she was caught. So she did the only thing left. She started crying. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she sobbed. "I swear, Steve. It just happened." I crossed my arms. "Don't give me that. You didn't slip and fall onto another man. You made a choice, Emily." Over and over again. She covered her face with her hands, shaking her head. "It was a mistake." I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "How long?" She sniffled. "What? How long has this been going on?" She hesitated. I already knew the answer, but I wanted to hear her say it. 6 months. I exhaled sharply. Even though I already knew, hearing it out loud hurt more than I expected. 6 months, I repeated, shaking my head. "Jesus Christ, Emily." She wiped her face, her expression shifting from guilt to desperation. "I love you," she whispered. "I do. Please, Steve. We can get past this." I laughed again, but there was no humor in it. "We?" I echoed. "There is no we anymore, Emily." Her face crumbled. "No," she said quickly, reaching for my hands. "Please. I made a mistake. I was stupid, I pulled away from her touch. A flicker of anger crossed her face at that. And just like that, the guilt disappeared. I saw the real Emily beneath the tears. She wasn't sorry she cheated. She was sorry she got caught. Her tone changed. "You weren't perfect either," she muttered. I stared at her. "Excuse me?" "You weren't always present," she accused. "You worked too much. You got comfortable. You stopped putting in effort." I stared at her in disbelief. "You're really going to blame me for your affair?" She folded her arms. I felt alone, Steve. And Jake was there. I clenched my fists. And I wasn't? She looked away. And that was it. That was the moment I stopped loving her. I didn't know if I wanted revenge or just a clean break. But one thing was clear. Emily and I were over. Emily sat across from me on the couch, her arms crossed, her eyes red from crying, but the anger creeping into her expression told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't sorry. She was only sorry she got caught. The way she flipped the script, how quickly she went from begging to blaming me, made my stomach turn. I had spent the last 10 years thinking I knew this woman. That we had something real. That, even with our problems, we were in this together. Now, I was looking at a stranger. And I had to decide. Do I make her suffer? Or do I walk away? Weighing my options. I had all the proof I needed. The texts. The photos. The receipts. The hotel visit. If I wanted to, I could destroy her. I could send everything to her boss and make sure she was fired. I could expose her to our friends and family, let them see the woman she had become. I could confront Jake, ruin his life the way he had ruined mine. But would that actually make me feel better? Would watching her cry, watching her world crumble, undo what she did to me? Would it take away the gut-wrenching betrayal? The sleepless nights? The feeling that my entire marriage had been a lie? I stared at her, my jaw clenched. "What are you thinking?" she asked cautiously. I let out a breath. "I'm thinking that I don't know who the hell you are." She flinched but didn't respond. I leaned back against the couch. "You know. I could ruin you, Emily. I could take everything. The house, the car. Hell, I could make sure you never work in this industry again." A flicker of fear crossed her face. "Steve, please." I held up a hand, silencing her. "I could tell your family. Your friends. I could make sure they all know what kind of person you are. What you've been doing behind my back." Her lips parted slightly, and I saw the first real hint of panic. I wasn't the passive, forgiving husband she had expected. She had underestimated me. I let my words sink in before continuing, my voice quiet but firm. "But I'm not going to do that." Her shoulders sagged slightly in relief. I hated that. I hated that she thought she was getting away with this. That she thought I would just roll over and let her have her way. She had no idea what was coming next. The terms of our end. "I'm filing for divorce," I said, standing up. She blinked. "Steve, wait." "No," I snapped. "You don't get a say in this. You made your choice when you let him touch you." She opened her mouth but didn't argue. Instead, she nodded. "Okay." She looked down at her hands, chewing her lip. I don't want this to get ugly." I let out a bitter laugh. "Ugly? You think you have a say in that?" She sighed. I don't want people to know. Can we just handle this quietly?" I tilted my head. "Ah. There it is." "What?" "The real reason you're suddenly so agreeable." Her jaw tightened. "I just don't think there's a reason to involve other people." I smirked. "Or maybe you don't want Jake's wife finding out." Her face drained of color. Bingo. The final blow. I had debated whether or not to reach out to Jake's wife. But now, I knew exactly what I needed to do. Emily had already shredded our marriage. I had nothing left to lose. So, while she was still sitting there, I grabbed my phone and pulled up Facebook. It didn't take long to find Jake's wife's profile. Emily lunged for me. "Steve, don't," she gasped, reaching for the phone. I pulled away easily. She never looked more desperate than in that moment. And honestly, I enjoyed it. I didn't care if it was petty. I didn't care if it was revenge-driven. I had spent months feeling like a fool, like the last person in the world to see the truth. Not anymore. So, with zero hesitation, I typed the message. "Hey, I think you should know what your husband has been up to. Call me." I hit send. Emily's face twisted in horror. "Steve," she whispered, shaking her head. You just ruined everything." I met her gaze. "No, Emily. You did." And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt free. Leaving her behind. The next few days were a blur. Jake's wife called me the very next morning. She broke down on the phone. Said she had suspected something but never had proof. I gave her everything. Every text. Every receipt. Every hotel visit. She cried. She thanked me. Then she told me she was filing for divorce, too. That made two of us. Emily didn't try to fight me on the divorce. She knew better. The day I moved out, she stood by the doorway, watching me pack my last box. "Are you sure we can't fix this?" she asked quietly. I stared at her, truly seeing her for what she was. A liar. A cheater. A woman who had destroyed our life together and only cared now because she was facing consequences. I shook my head. "No, Emily. We can't." And then I walked out the door. For good. The house felt different the last time I stepped inside. It wasn't a home anymore. It was just a place filled with memories I no longer wanted. Emily was sitting at the dining table when I walked in. She had a cup of coffee in front of her, but she wasn't drinking it. She was just staring at it, lost in thought. I took a deep breath. This was it. This was the last time we would ever sit down as husband and wife. I had come back for one final conversation. Not because I needed closure, I already had that. But because I wanted her to understand. She didn't expect me to move so fast. She looked up as I sat across from her. I set the envelope on the table between us. The divorce agreement. She exhaled, shaking her head. "Jesus, Steve. You really didn't waste any time." I folded my hands in front of me. "Neither did you." Her lips tightened, but she didn't argue. She reached for the envelope, opening it slowly, scanning the contents. I watched her face as she read. When she got to the section about assets, she glanced up. "You're not asking for the house?" I shook my head. "I don't want it." She hesitated. "Are you sure?" It's ours." I let out a short, bitter laugh. "No, Emily. It was ours. Now it's just yours." A part of me wanted to burn it to the ground. But I realized something: I didn't care enough to fight for it. I just wanted to move on. She couldn't fake regret anymore. Emily flipped through the pages, her expression unreadable. Then she leaned back and crossed her arms. "This is really it, huh?" she muttered. I nodded. "Yeah." She exhaled through her nose, shaking her head. "I don't understand how you're doing this." I raised an eyebrow. "Doing what?" "Just letting go." I leaned forward. "Emily. You let go of us the moment you let him touch you." She swallowed hard, but she didn't deny it. Good. I needed her to sit in that truth. She wanted me to stay miserable. She hesitated. "I thought we had something worth saving." I clenched my jaw. "You had months to think about that, Emily. But you didn't stop. You didn't care about saving our marriage until you got caught." She didn't respond. And that's when it hit me. She didn't want me back. She just didn't want to be the bad guy. She wanted me to hesitate. To doubt myself. To wonder if maybe, just maybe, this could still work. She wanted me to hold on to the pain the way she was holding on to her guilt. She wanted me to stay miserable. But I wasn't miserable anymore. I was free. The final goodbye. I stood up, grabbing my coat. Emily's eyes widened slightly. "Wait." I sighed. "What?" She hesitated. "So that's it? You're just done?" I looked at her for a long moment. And then I smiled. "Yeah, Emily," I said softly. "I'm done." For the first time, she looked genuinely afraid. Not afraid of losing me, she had lost me a long time ago. Afraid because she realized I was okay. And she wasn't. I turned toward the door. "Steve." I stopped but didn't turn around. There was a long pause. Then, barely above a whisper, she said, "I hope you'll be happy." I closed my eyes for a second. Then I opened the door. And without another word, I walked out. For the last time. I didn't look back. Not when I walked out the front door. Not when I got in my car. Not when I drove away from the house that had once been ours, the house where we built a life, where we laughed, argued, celebrated, and dreamed. The house where I had once felt safe. Now, it was just four walls and a roof. A shell of a life that no longer belonged to me. And for the first time since all of this began, I was okay with that. The aftermath of betrayal. The first few weeks were a blur. I moved into a small apartment across town, something temporary while I figured out my next steps. It wasn't much, just a one-bedroom with barely enough space for my things, but it felt like a clean slate. No memories of Emily. No reminders of the life I had lost. Just me. The silence was deafening at first. I had spent years sharing my space with someone else. Now, it was just me and the occasional hum of the refrigerator. I spent too much time thinking about Emily. About what she had done. About the signs I had ignored. But the anger that had once burned inside me? It was fading. Not because I forgave her. But because I refused to let her choices define me. The people who chose sides. Not everyone took the news well. Some friends were shocked when they found out. Others weren't surprised at all. I had been so blind, but apparently, they had seen it coming. Emily lost a lot of respect. Her parents, who had always been so warm toward me, called to apologize. They didn't defend her. They were disgusted with what she had done. She lost some friends, too. Not because I asked anyone to choose sides, but because people don't like being around liars. And Jake? His wife took everything. She divorced him immediately. Took their kids. Got the house. Last I heard, he was living in some tiny rental on the other side of town, barely scraping by after getting hit with alimony and child support. I should have felt vindicated. But mostly? I just felt tired. Because no matter how much they suffered, it didn't change what had already been done. Rebuilding myself. I threw myself into work. Not because I had to, but because I needed the distraction. I started hitting the gym again, running until my legs burned, lifting until my arms shook. I reconnected with old friends, people I had drifted away from because Emily and I had been so wrapped up in our own little world. For the first time in years, I felt like my own person again. No more second-guessing myself. No more walking on eggshells. Just me, figuring out what life looked like without her. And it turned out? It didn't look so bad. Running into Emily again. It took 3 months before I saw her again. I was at the grocery store, standing in the produce aisle, trying to decide between green or red apples. And then, out of nowhere. Steve? My entire body tensed. I turned. And there she was. Emily. She looked different. Thinner. A little more tired around the eyes. Like someone who hadn't been sleeping well. Hey, I said, my voice neutral. She gave me a small, hesitant smile. How have you been? I shrugged. I'm doing well. She nodded slowly, glancing down at the floor. Good. I'm glad. There was a weight in the air between us. 1,000 unsaid things. But I didn't ask how she was. I didn't care. Because for the first time since this nightmare started, she wasn't my problem anymore. She hesitated, biting her lip. Do you ever think about us? I let out a slow breath, considering my words. Then, I shook my head. No, Emily, I said. I don't. And I meant it. Her face crumbled for a fraction of a second before she forced a smile. Right, she whispered. I should go. She turned and walked away. And I just stood there, staring at the apples, feeling nothing. No anger. No sadness. Just peace. Because I finally realized. I had already let her go. A new beginning. That night, I sat on my tiny apartment balcony, looking out over the city. A beer in my hand. The cool air brushing against my skin. And for the first time in a long time, I felt light. I didn't know what my future looked like. But I knew this. I wasn't broken anymore. I wasn't trapped in the past. I was free. And that? That was enough. For now.